It's finally here. It's the last third of the season, which means playoffs are coming up, and that means that teams are going to be pushing for playoff spots, and we get to see some great hockey. It's going to be amazing. I hope you guys enjoy it with me, because it's going to be great. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hockey Sense. I'm your host, Joshua Kessner, and today we're going to be talking about the overall season outlook for the last third of the season before the playoffs start. That's what we're going to talk about. We're just going to talk about this current last stretch of the regular season before playoffs start. And for this, I have my outline. We're going to talk about the teams that are doing well, the teams that are bubble teams, and the teams that are playing poorly. We are going to talk about my playoff predictions, and we are going to talk about the All-Star game at the very end. So, before we get into this overall season outlook, I want to mention it is currently January 10th of 2017, and there are two teams currently on bye week, and those are just about to end. Those teams are just about to get off their bye week. We have the Colorado Avalanche, which ends the 11th of January, which is actually tomorrow. And we have the New York Rangers, which ends the 12th, so in 2 days of January. And the upcoming bye week, we have the Philadelphia Flyers, the 16th through the 20th of January. So keep that in mind. If you look at the standings right now and you're like, why is he putting them there? Well, those teams are in bye week. So, like for example, the New York Rangers are actually in a playoff spot. They're in a wild card playoff spot, and I actually have them as one of my top teams. Reasons being is, well, we'll get into that in a second. So, yeah, keep that in mind. Those are the current teams that are on bye week, and the Philadelphia Flyers are upcoming. So, we're going to go through my outline here that I like to go through. We're going to start with the good teams here. So, if you have not listened to my last overall season outlook, how I do this is I look at the top 5 teams out of each conference, and these are my picks. These are not based off of rankings or standings. These are based off of my personal opinion with a little bit of statistics involved. I'm not going to list those statistics, but I'm saying like based off of their ranking has a little bit to do with it, but most of it is my personal opinion based off watching them play and where they are. So, let's talk about the Eastern Conference. All right, so I mentioned the New York Rangers on bye week, and I said that was going to be important. Here's why. They're one of my top teams. They're my top 5 teams out of the Eastern Conference, one of my top 5 teams. Now, I am a fan of the New York Rangers, but I'm trying to keep this as objective as I can, even though it is my opinion. I'm being objective with my opinions as much as I can. And the New York Rangers, while I do really cheer and root for them, they are definitely one of the top contending teams in the league. There is no question about it. And in my opinion, definitely one of the most dominant teams in the East right now. Probably could throw in Pittsburgh just ahead of them right now. But the New York Rangers are definitely a dominant team. I mean, if you look at where they are and you realize, first of all, they're in a wild card spot, but I think part of that is because they've had a week-long break. Second thing is, the New York Rangers are a team that is deep. We have Rick Nash, Pavel Buchnevich, and Mike Zibanejad, who are all out, and they are all injured. And because of that, other players have had to step up. And guess what? They have. They have played their roles, and they have played outstanding hockey. They have come back from major deficits, and it has caused the team to push themselves to a level of hockey that we did not see last year from the Rangers. And it is taking everyone to win hockey games now, instead of relying on a couple of players from the Rangers. And that is helping them, for sure. Once Rick Nash and Zibanejad and Buchnevich come back, we have one of the best offensive teams in the league playing for a playoff spot, and it'll be interesting. And once they get into the playoffs, you can be excited, because I think that is going to be the team, one of the interesting teams to watch out of the East. Speaking of interesting teams, let's talk about the Pittsburgh Penguins. Again, another one of my top 5 teams. The Pittsburgh Penguins are a great team, and I think that they have an actual ability to win a Stanley Cup again. I don't say that about many teams for repeats, because I don't think normally repeats happen, and I think they're very hard to come by. Pittsburgh is the one team that can do it. Out of all the teams, I think Pittsburgh is the one team that can do it. New York also, I want to mention, New York is also a team that can make a run for a Stanley Cup this year too. So, but Pittsburgh is very similar to New York. Only difference is they've won a cup last year, and their team is exactly the same, pretty much. So, overall, Pittsburgh is definitely a good team, and there's not much bad to say about them right now. So, reason why they're a top 5 team out of my Eastern Conference right now. Montreal Canadiens. Now, I think part of this is because of Shea Weber and Carey Price. Both of those players are outstanding players, and there's no doubt that Montreal is a strong team. And because of that, we see them dominating the Atlantic Division. They are one of the best teams in the Atlantic, and there's no question about it. Their play has shown it, and in my opinion, they have a really good chance of getting to the Eastern Conference Final. I don't see them getting past that, because I think someone from the Metropolitan Division is going to beat them, because I think the Metropolitan Division is stronger, and that there are teams in there that are stronger than they are. And overall, even though they are, in my opinion, not a Stanley Cup team, I think they definitely will make a deep run, and they are definitely a strong team this year. Speaking of strong teams, we have the Columbus Blue Jackets up next. They're my 4th team out of the Eastern Conference. And while, yes, they just ended their 16-game winning streak, I think my biggest reason for this is they're a very interesting team to watch as well. They play a lot like New York, where they like to play down low, or an old New York team. The new New York Rangers, while they do play down low, play a little bit more off of the rush, and I think Columbus is a little bit more of a setup team this year than the New York Rangers are this year. And I think that's because of John Tortorella. We saw the same play from the New York Rangers when Tortorella was head coach, so I think that's a Tortorella thing. And they got some really, really good players on the Columbus Blue Jackets. And not only that, but Sergei Bobrovsky is playing really well for them. They have a good goaltender, good defense, good offense, and overall they are a strong team and a force to be reckoned with. The only thing that Columbus does not have, that all these other teams do have on my list, is playoff experience. And that is why I'm not really sure how far they'll go in the playoffs. In fact, I think they'll probably lose in the first or second round is my pick. But they're definitely one of the top teams out of the Metropolitan Division and out of the Eastern Conference as a whole. Lastly, my last team out of the East, I have the Washington Capitals. And while they have not done well in the past in the playoffs, where they would frequently lose necessary games. That does not mean they are not a top team out of the East right now. Again, this is off of their regular season. We are not talking their playoffs, but they are definitely a top team out of that conference. And in the current regular season, they're definitely playing really well right now. Their offense is doing well, and they're playing more defensively than what they did last year. Overall, they are definitely a strong team and definitely worthy of my top 5 out of their conference. I think that this year they will get to the first or second round again if they either the first or second round out of the Metropolitan side of things. If they end up securing a wild card spot, I could see them pushing all the way to the Western or the Eastern Conference Final and still losing out of that. Because I think that both Pittsburgh and New York have way better chances of beating them this year than any other team. And yeah. So, yeah, the the Washington Capitals are definitely a team to be reckoned with in the regular season. We'll see how strong they are in the playoffs. Not saying they will lose first round, but I don't see them winning a Stanley Cup is my point. Or even getting to the finals. I don't really see them getting there. Now, I could be wrong, but I've been wrong before many times. But I don't see them as of right now going all the way to a Stanley Cup. So, let's move out west here. Let's move out to the Western Conference. We're going to go to the Edmonton Oilers first. My first pick for strong teams. Now, I know a lot of people pick the Edmonton Oilers for their pick of Connor McDavid, and that's about it. Meanwhile, there are a lot of other players on that team that make up the team, and players like Talbot, and we also have Lucic and Patrick Maroon. We have there's some good players on that team, and what we have seen out of the Edmonton Oilers is nothing but strong play this year. The question is, will that strong play do well in the playoff scene? In my opinion, no. I think they're going to lose first or second round. I think their inexperience is going to hurt them, and playing against some stronger teams will also hurt them. They can compete with teams like Anaheim and San Jose, but I don't see them getting past a team like Chicago, Minnesota Wild, the St. Louis Blues. I don't see them getting past them. Even the LA Kings have a better chance, in my opinion, of beating the Edmonton Oilers. And that's just due to inexperience, in my opinion. So, strong team, definitely doing really well in the regular season. We'll see what happens in the playoffs, but right now I'm predicting that they'll lose first or second round. My next pick is the Anaheim Ducks. Now, Anaheim does play in probably the weakest division the weakest division out of all of them in the Pacific. And again, they are also playing with some injuries, including Ryan Getzlaf is one of their injuries. And it's not helping them. It's actually hurting them. And they are a fairly deep team, not super deep, but fairly deep. And this year they are a more structured team because of their new coach, Randy Carlyle. Definitely a different Anaheim Ducks team than what we saw last year. And I think that they have a chance of doing well in the playoffs, but we'll see what happens. We'll see if coaching changes or the change of coach makes a difference in the playoffs. It could make them worse. And that's something I don't really want to see, considering I'm also an Anaheim Ducks fan. But They are playing well enough to make the playoffs. We'll see what happens in the playoffs. I think experience from the players is going to help them. And Randy Carlyle has won a Stanley Cup. So if he gets them to a playoffs and they play an amazing Anaheim Ducks game, they could go all the way to the finals. Potentially bring home a Stanley Cup. My thing is, with you, if you put Anaheim up against some of the stronger teams out of the East, Pittsburgh, New York, you put them up against Montreal, Columbus. Actually, no, not Columbus, but even if you put them up against Washington, I feel like Anaheim would lose those games. And I think part of that is just speed. Speed is Anaheim's weakness, as it has been for a while. And overall, yeah. I mean, you compare them against the teams that I just mentioned, those teams are getting consistent play out of all their lines. Anaheim is getting consistent play out of Ryan Kessler, Cam Fowler, and Nick Ritchie. That's roughly about it. And other players need to step it up, like Corey Perry. Ryan Getzlof's injured, but when he comes back, we need play from him. All those players need to step up their game if they want to win a Stanley Cup for the Anaheim Ducks. San Jose Sharks, again, no different than how they were last year. Strong team, strong play, big, heavy hitting. I don't see them going all the way to a Stanley Cup. I see them losing to Minnesota, St. Louis, or Chicago if they get all the way to a Western Conference final. They even could lose to an Anaheim Ducks team in the playoffs if they play each other before they get to the Western Conference final. So that's where I put them. I think second round is where they're going to lose. They're either going to lose in the second round or the Western Conference final. That's where I would put them. Strong team though, and definitely a good case to go all the way to the finals again. I think other teams have a better chance of doing it than they do. All right, my fourth team, the Chicago Blackhawks. Now, it's not the best, or how should I say this? I don't really enjoy putting them on this list, the Chicago Blackhawks, so many years in a row. But I do think that they are a top team out of the West. And I think that Chicago definitely has a viable contention for the Cup. They have a definitely a good chance of going all the way to the finals. And yeah, I mean, there's not much to say about Chicago other than the fact that they are still kind of the core of the team is still there, but there are some pieces that are different, and a few minor differences, a few younger guys, and we'll see if that hurts them in the playoffs. But as we've seen in years past, I'm going to say it probably won't hurt them that much. So, yeah. Overall, Chicago Blackhawks still playing really well. I think they have a deep contention for the Stanley Cup. Lastly, I want to talk about my last team, which is the Minnesota Wild. Now, I know a lot of people would be like, where's St. Louis on this list? St. Louis is also a team that many people could argue for as a top team. I'm putting Minnesota Wild on this list because they are playing outstanding right now, and they are doing really well. Not only that, but picking up players like Eric Stahl has really helped them. And if we're going to be quite honest, the Minnesota Wild are a team that I think can beat the Chicago Blackhawks this year. They have made the jump. St. Louis is still St. Louis. They haven't really changed all that much. They're a strong team. They have a chance of going all the way. I think Minnesota has a better chance of beating a team like Chicago, which is going to happen. They're going to probably end up playing. And if you put Minnesota versus St. Louis together, I think Minnesota wins that matchup. Obviously, I think that one would probably go to a Game 6 or a Game 7. But I think that overall, Minnesota would win that one out. But in terms of the regular season, Minnesota is playing a little bit better right now, so that's why I put them in my top 5. All right, so that is all my teams that are playing really well and have a good chance of going all the way to the finals and that kind of thing. Leave a comment down below what you think, who you think I either left out of this list, if you agree with someone. Let me know down below who you think. And out of this list, who do you think could win a Stanley Cup or who could leave early? Leave a comment down below on that. All right. So let's move on. Let's move on to the bubble teams. So these are, I'm going to be a little bit quicker on these. The bubble teams are teams that are pushing for that wild card spot and still playing decently well. So out of the East, I have the Toronto Maple Leafs, and my reason for this is, well, they're playing well and they're winning games, and they're doing way better than what everyone thought they would be. They're pushing for a playoff spot, and I think they can get that wild card playoff spot. If they do, it'll be their first time in the playoffs for a while, and it'll be good experience for the young guys of the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I think it'll be important in their success in the future. Overall, Toronto is a quick team. They are a skilled team, probably not as deep as, say, a New York or a Pittsburgh, but definitely a strong team. All right, moving on. Let's talk about the Philadelphia Flyers. So the Philadelphia Flyers are, again, pushing for that playoff spot, and I think Toronto and Philadelphia are going to fight for that spot. It's just going to be a matter of who gets it first. And I think the reason for this is because Washington is for sure going to be in a playoff position. And New York is also going to be in a playoff position. Columbus and Pittsburgh are also going to be in playoff positions. That's going to be 4 teams right there. 3 of the Metropolitan Division teams are going to secure a playoff spot. One of them is going to be in a wild card spot. And that's going to leave one spot open. I think that the Toronto Maple Leafs are going to secure it, actually. I think the Philadelphia Flyers are going to choke probably the last part of the really, really last couple weeks. And Toronto's going to end up securing that spot. So, overall, I think that's going to be how that works out. But the Philadelphia Flyers definitely have a good team this year, and they have a good chance of still getting that wild card spot. Even though I think that Toronto's going to get it, that doesn't mean that Philadelphia won't. I think that Philadelphia definitely has a strong chance of winning that wild card spot. Good offensive play from Christmas break up until now. Pretty decent offensive play. Defensively, probably not the greatest, but still pretty strong. Lastly, my last team I have is the Florida Panthers. Now, I was trying to find a third team for this, and the Florida Panthers are the closest to getting a playoff spot out of the rest of the list. And the Florida Panthers are still not doing all that well. And it's hurting them. And so I don't really think that Florida has a really good chance of winning a wild card spot. They might if they win a bunch of games all of a sudden. But I don't think that they have I don't think that they will, because I don't think that they have the drive to do it, really. I think that they have the ability to do it because they have one out of those three I just listed. Florida is a little bit deeper than all those teams, in my opinion. The only difference is that Florida is a little bit older than the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Philadelphia Flyers. So, overall, Florida has a chance, in my opinion, just not a very good one of getting a wild card spot. All right, so moving out. Let's move out west again. Let's go out to the Western Conference, where we will start off with the LA Kings. The LA Kings are, again, securing a first wild card spot, in my opinion, and once everything ends. They are a strong team for sure, and there is nothing that has stopped them from being in the playoffs. They are in one of the weaker divisions, and if they were playing in the Central Division, I'm not sure they would be in a wild card spot. But that being said, they are still doing decently enough to the point that they are in that first wild card spot consistently. So I think they're going to win that spot. That leaves one spot open in the West. I think the Calgary Flames and the Vancouver Canucks are going to be pushing for that spot. They're going to be flip-flopping between the two. And those are my last two teams out of the Western Conference that are bubble teams, by the way. And I think the Vancouver Canucks are going to beat them out. I think Vancouver is a more solid team. They are a well-rounded team compared to Calgary, in my opinion. And overall, I think Vancouver is a little bit better than Calgary right now. That being said, Vancouver's weakness is their goaltending, in my opinion. And Calgary wins on that one because they have Elliott. So, overall, I think Calgary has some strong offense, but they're just inconsistent. And they're a little bit weaker defensively than Vancouver, in my opinion. But, that being said, both those teams are going to be pushing for a wild card spot, in my opinion. I think Vancouver will win out. I don't see either team going far in the playoffs, really. So it's not like a matter of who will go further. I think both teams will probably would lose first round anyway. The Kings are probably the only team out of all the bubble teams that could go another round at least. Toronto can't go very far. I think they would lose first round, and the Philadelphia Flyers, I think, lose first round, depending on who they play. LA Kings and the Calgary Flames and the Vancouver Canucks, LA is the only team that I could see going all the way to the Western Conference. That's the only team I could see. If they have Jonathan Quick. If they don't have Jonathan Quick, then they probably lose first round. That's how I see LA. All right. So, moving on from the bubble teams. Before I do, actually, leave a comment down below on who you think is a bubble team. Who you think has a better shot of winning those wild card spots. And if you disagree with me, say you think that a wild card spot actually has a good chance of winning the cup or something, leave a comment down below. All right, let's move on. We're going to talk about the bad teams here really quick. All right, so out of my Eastern Conference, well, actually, before I get into the Eastern Conference, I want to say that these teams are teams that I expected to do better than what they are. So they're playing poorly, and I expected them to be doing much better. That is how I picked them. So, out of the Eastern Conference, I have the Detroit Red Wings, the New York Islanders, and the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, the most surprising team on this list is the Tampa Bay Lightning, in my opinion. I expected Detroit not to make the playoffs this year. I know a lot of people always expect them to make the playoffs because of their playoff, showing up in the playoffs every year for 25 years or something like that. And the New York Islanders I expected to be playing a little bit better than where they are. But I think that Tampa Bay is the most exciting I shouldn't say most exciting, most disappointing team to watch that had some excitement behind them. I thought that Tampa Bay was definitely a team that I thought could make a playoff run all the way to the finals. But as of right now, they're nowhere to be seen. And I think part of this is loss of Steven Stamkos and the loss of Ben Bishop. Ben Bishop keeps getting injured for them. Steven Stamkos keeps getting injured for them. And it's done nothing but hurt the Tampa Bay Lightning. When they're healthy, they are an exciting team to watch. They have beaten some really good teams in the playoffs, including the New York Rangers. They have beaten the Montreal Canadiens and even the Detroit Red Wings. But that does not mean that playing healthy is the way you have to play. And one of the things that sucks is in the playoffs is everyone is injured. And you got nothing but severe injuries on your team. And I mean, Ryan McDonough from the New York Rangers skated all in the Eastern Conference Finals. He was playing with a broken ankle. Not quite sure how he did that, but he did. And there are numerous stories out of that the playoffs that you can hear of players going immediately into surgery after they're done and they win the cup or whatever. Because that's the nature of playing in the playoffs. And you have to learn to win with your backup players. You can't win only on your star players. And Tampa Bay is learning that the hard way right now. We've seen that from Pittsburgh. We've seen that from Detroit. We've seen that from the Washington Capitals, and so on and so forth. Your star players need to contribute, yes, but you also need your other team players to contribute as well. And Tampa Bay is hurting because of this, because they need their backup players to contribute. The New York Islanders are going to be playing for I don't know what they're playing for at this point. They straight up just need to get some more players to surround John Tavares. And they made a good run last year. That's why I was surprised. I'm not sure I really expected them to go all the way to a wild card spot like they did last year. I expected them to push for it and be in the position to push for it, but I didn't, expecting them to be in the playoffs the next year is a little pushy in my opinion. And they're hurting from some trades that they made. And that's why I'm surprised about the New York Islanders, is how poorly they're actually playing from just a couple trades. Detroit, I think, is just they're in a rebuild, but I'm also surprised at how poorly they're playing. I think they could have, with the players they have, I think they could easily be a wild card 2 spot, a second wild card spot, but they're not. With their team setup that they have, they could do that. The way they're playing, though, they're playing like they're not all that great of a team. And I think part of that is just because Detroit is rebuilding. That's just how it is. Their 25-year playoff, in being in the playoffs for 25 years in a row is impressive, yes. But at some point, you need to rebuild your team. You need to, they lost Pavel Datsyuk. They lost a couple other players. And they need to rebuild their team. That's just all Detroit needs to do. And so that is, but I'm still surprised at how poorly they're playing. So, yeah. Let's move out west and talk about the teams out west that are playing poorly. We have the Colorado Avalanche, the Nashville Predators, and the Dallas Stars. Now, the Colorado Avalanche are bottom of the Western Conference, and I'm surprised at how poorly they're playing. I would not expect them to be in a playoff position, but I do expect them to play a little bit better than where they are right now. That being said, let's move on to another team, the Nashville Predators, who I expected to fully be in a playoff spot. And I'm quite baffled as to why they are here. I understand that the Central Division is a tough division to play in. However, they are definitely wild card worthy, and in my opinion, can push for that wild card 2 spot if they play really, really well for the last part of the season. They are not a fun team to play in the playoffs. And we saw top teams play them in the playoffs and get frustrated with them. Teams like the Anaheim Ducks last year just did not. They struggled with them. Even the Sharks struggled with them a little bit. So overall, Nashville's a strong team and a tough team to play in the playoffs. I think ultimately where they are positionally right now is because of the trade with Shea Weber and PK Subban. I think that is the biggest reason, honestly. Because Shea Weber was really the backbone of the Nashville Predators, in my opinion. And picking up PK Subban was a surprising trade nonetheless, but it's helped Montreal more than it's helped Nashville. So I think that's part of the reason as well. Lastly, let's talk about the Dallas Stars. Why are the Dallas Stars on this list? Well, the Dallas Stars are on this list because I think that the Dallas Stars could easily be a top team out of the Central Division, but they are playing not all that great. In fact, they have one of the best scoring teams last year, but this year they're nowhere to be found. And I think part of that is they play teams like the Minnesota Wild, the Chicago Blackhawks, and the St. Louis Blues, and all of them have way better defenses than they do. And in fact, Chicago, Minnesota, and St. Louis all have competing offenses with them right now. And the Dallas Stars offense is not running at peak capacity right now, and so that is hurting the Dallas Stars because their defense is lacking compared to their offense. Their offense really carried them last year, and this year, because it's not producing, it's hurting them. So, those are my teams that are playing really poorly right now, or the bad teams, as I like to call them. Leave a comment down below on who you think should be in that list or who you would throw into that list. And if you agree with me or disagree with me, let me know in the comments down below. All right. So let's move on. Let's talk about the playoffs here. The playoffs are coming up here. It's the last third of the season. Let's talk about playoff predictions. So, current status of the teams right now is what I'm going off of. And we are going to talk about the teams that have a good chance of making the playoffs and which could be deep run teams. And I pick 3 per conference. So let's start with the West this time. We started with the East all the other times. So let's start with the West this time. So my 3 teams are the Anaheim Ducks, the Chicago Blackhawks, and the Minnesota Wild. Those are my 3 picks for teams that are going to have a good chance of making the playoffs. And I think they're going to have good chances of going deep in the playoffs. All those teams have deep run capabilities. The Anaheim Ducks, they have a decently deep team. Chicago Blackhawks, depth. The Minnesota Wild, decent depth. Overall, just strong play from all of them. Anaheim is the only one that I think is weak offensively compared to the other 2, compared to Chicago and Minnesota at this point in time. If they get into the playoffs and their offense starts kicking, they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. All right. 3 teams that I think people can make an argument about and say that they have good chances to make the playoffs as well are St. Louis, San Jose, and Edmonton. Again, all strong teams. And all have really good cases to argue for making deep runs into the playoffs. All right, move on. Let's go out east. And we'll talk about my teams here that I have picked. I have picked the Montreal Canadiens, the Pittsburgh Penguins, and the New York Rangers. Montreal Canadiens are definitely strong defensively, strong in goaltending, and offensively they're a little weak, but their defense is definitely going to help them out in the playoffs. I think they're a deep run team. I think they can go all the way to the Western Conference Final, but I don't think they'll get any further than that. Pittsburgh Penguins are my next team, and the Pittsburgh Penguins, not much needs to be said. They're the same team from last year that won the Stanley Cup, and they're not any different, and they're playing well. I think they have a chance of going all the way again this year. The New York Rangers, not much needs to be said. I think speed, they're one of the fastest teams in the league. They're a little faster than Pittsburgh even right now. And when all their players are producing, they are a deadly team. They have one of the best offensive capabilities in the league. Defensively, they need to work on it a little bit, but overall, offensively, they have some really good offensive capability. And they have some amazing goals on their highlight reel this year. Overall, I think these are my 3 picks out of those. I think both the New York Rangers and the Pittsburgh Penguins have really good chances of winning Stanley Cups this year. Montreal, I think, has a chance of going to the Western Conference Final, but ultimately losing. That's how I see it. Again, I would consider all these teams deep run teams. Now, you can make the argument for 2 teams out of the East as well, and that's Washington and Columbus. I think could also be argued. My only thing with Washington and Columbus is I don't see them as deep run teams. Washington could go a little deeper than Columbus in my opinion, but that depends on where they land. If they land in the wild card spot, they could go all the way to the Eastern Conference Final. But if they end up being third in the Metropolitan Division, I don't see them going past first or second round. Let me go back to the Western Conference here for a second, because I didn't talk about this. Anaheim Ducks, I think, can go all the way to a Stanley Cup if they could go to the final. I think they'll ultimately lose in the final if they do get there, though. But they need their offense to be running, and defensively they need to be better, and they need to be healthy. Chicago, again, can win a Stanley Cup, go all the way. Minnesota, I think, is a deep run team as well. I think they can go to the Western Conference Final. Depends on who they play, but I think they could go all the way to a Stanley Cup depending on who they play. St. Louis, San Jose, and Edmonton. I think St. Louis and San Jose are the only teams that I think could actually go all the way to a final. I think they would ultimately lose in the finals, though. And Edmonton, I don't see as a deep run team. I think they are like Columbus. They lose first or second round. So that's why I didn't put them there. And again, those are St. Louis, San Jose, and Edmonton are teams that I think are able to be argued for deep run teams. All right. So that is my playoff prediction. Leave a comment down below on what you think it needs to be addressed for this, or maybe leave a comment down below on what you think, which team you think has a better playoff run than what I listed, or if you agree with me, or if you disagree with me, just leave a comment down below. Yeah. All right. Before we end this, though, we are going to talk about something that is going on that is special. That is the All-Star Game out in Los Angeles. We're going to talk about that. We're going to break down each team. And I have I want to talk about a couple things here, and yeah, so we're gonna break it down. So first, we're gonna start off with the Atlantic Division. The Atlantic Division is definitely a strong team this year. We have some strong play from this team, and I'm gonna list the Atlantic Division for you right here. The All-Star rosters are Nikita Kucherov from the Tampa Bay Lightning, Brad Marchand from the Boston Bruins, Austin Matthews from the Toronto Maple Leafs, Franz Nielsen from the Red Wings, Kyle Okposo from the Buffalo Sabres, Vincent Trocheck from the Panthers. We have Victor Hedman from the Tampa Bay Lightning, Eric Carlson from the Senators, Shea Weber from the Canadiens, Carey Price from the Canadiens, and Tuukka Rask from the Boston Bruins. Overall, I like this list. My only the thing that I'm interested in is why did they pick Kyle Okposo over Jack Eichel from Buffalo? I think Jack Eichel has has played a lot better than Kyle Okposo has, and not only that, but I think Jack Eichel is a leader. I don't really see Kyle Okposo as that way, and I think Jack Eichel actually deserves to be in this selection, in my opinion. My other question was Franz Nielsen from Detroit. In my opinion, if you're going to pick from the Detroit Red Wings, I'd rather see Dylan Larkin, Thomas Tatar, or Henrik Zetterberg. All those players, I think, have better stats than Franz Nielsen and are a little bit more deserving for playoff selection or all-star selection than Franz Nielsen. So I'm quite curious as to why they picked these two for the Atlantic Division. Moving on. Oh, before I move on, actually, I should say, the Atlantic Division is still a strong selection. I like a lot of the selections. It's just Kyle Okposo and Franz Nielsen that I kind of am like, why were they picked? Moving on, let's talk about the Metro Division. So, I know a lot of people are going to say that the Metro Division is the strongest, and I think the All-Star team selection proves that because we have some of the strongest All-Star selection out of all of that. We have Sidney Crosby from the Pittsburgh Penguins, Taylor Hall from the New Jersey Devils, Evgeny Malkin from the Pittsburgh Penguins, Alex Ovechkin from the Washington Capitals, Wayne Simmons from the Philadelphia Flyers, John Tavares from the Islanders. We have Justin Falk from the Hurricanes, Seth Jones from the Blue Jackets, Ryan McDonough from the Rangers. We have Sergei Bobrovsky from the from the Columbus Blue Jackets. I don't know why I couldn't say that team name. The Columbus Blue Jackets has Sergei Bobrovsky in the Metropolitan team, and we have Braden Holtby from the Washington Capitals. This team is absolutely stacked. Just overall stacked. I am so surprised at how strong this team is. Defensively, I think McDonough is probably the strongest out of all of them. But that being said, they're still pretty strong. Offensively, they have one of the strongest teams in this, in my opinion. So it's a definitely a good mix. I don't have any qualms with the selections on that list. All right, let's move on to the Western Conference. We have the Central Division and their rosters. So let's talk about them for a second. So we have Patrick Kane from the Chicago Blackhawks, Patrick Laine from the Winnipeg Jets. We have Nathan MacKinnon from the Colorado Avalanche, Tyler Seguin from the Dallas Stars, Vladimir Tarasenko from the St. Louis Blues. We have Jonathan Toews from the Blackhawks, PK Subban from the Nashville Predators, Duncan Keith from the Blackhawks, and we have Ryan Suter from the Minnesota Wild. For goaltenders, we have Corey Crawford from the Blackhawks, and we have Devin Dubnyk from the Wild. So, overall, I don't really have a whole lot of complaints about this list. My only thing is Chicago has 4 people from their team on this list. And the only 2 people that I think could be flipped out for other people, and you could make an argument for their position, is Jonathan Toews. I think I would have rather seen Eric Stahl or Mike Fisher. I think those, in my opinion, I would have rather seen them. But, I mean, yes, Toews is a strong player. I just feel like Eric Stahl and Mike Fisher are playing a little bit better right now. And that would have been if I were to pick that spot, I think those would be my first 2. Probably Eric Stahl would have been my first pick for that. I think Kane and Keith obviously deserve their pick. And then Crawford was my other one from Chicago. I think he's a strong goaltender, and you could obviously make a case for him to be an all-star goaltender. But I would like to see Jake Allen from the Blues actually here. And my reason for this is just because he's been playing outstanding for the last, ever since the Winter Classic, really. He's been playing outstanding, and I think he is a great goaltender for this season, and he's been very strong. And I just I would like to see a little bit more diversity in this group. It's still a strong group, but I think a little diversity would have been more interesting to watch, in my opinion. But overall, it's still a strong group. Definitely some interesting players. We have Patrick Kane and Patrick Laine together, and that is going to be interesting to watch, along with Tarasenko, and we have Ryan Suter. Man, it's going to be a good list. Devin Dubnyk from the Wild's going to be playing too. It's going to be a good list to watch. All right, from the Pacific Division, we have Connor McDavid from the Oilers. We have Jeff Carter from the Kings. Johnny Gaudreau from the Flames. We have Bo Horvat from the Vancouver Canucks. We have Ryan Kessler from the Ducks. Joe Pavelski from the Sharks. Brent Burns from the Sharks. Drew Doughty from the Kings. Cam Fowler from the Ducks. Martin Jones from the Sharks. And Mike Smith from the Coyotes. I actually don't have a whole lot of problems with this list as well. I think this one's probably the weaker one of the bunch, and I think the Metropolitan is the strongest. With the Central Division being second strongest. I think that my only interesting thing that I noticed was Mike Smith from the Coyotes. I'm not saying that he's a bad goaltender, but I have not seen enough play from him for him to be, I don't know, a consideration in my mind that would make him a all-star goaltender. I think he's a strong goaltender, and I think he's playing on a weak team, which is probably not great for him. But I'm not really sure he deserves to be an all-star, really, at this point in time, at least from what I've seen. Granted, this is my opinion, and obviously the NHL opinion matters more than my opinion. But I don't really have any I don't have any reason to really make him a all-star. I mean, he does have a decent save percentage right now. I mean, he has a .918 save percentage, which is obviously good. I don't know if they went strictly off of stats, because if he has a really high save percentage compared to some of the other goaltenders, then yeah, I mean, it would make sense. I was just curious to see that they didn't put him on or put someone else in front of him, such as Cam Talbot or even a Budai from the LA Kings. Now, I would rather have seen Talbot because he's an Edmonton Oiler goaltender. But it's understandable why they have him, I guess. It's just I was just surprised by Mike Smith. Overall, I think strong picks from the Pacific Division. I didn't have any qualms out of that list. I think the most qualms I had were with the Central Division, but overall, I think that it's a good list nonetheless. I just had some other opinions on who they could have picked instead of those players, but that doesn't mean these players didn't deserve to be on the list. So, overall, for the overall All-Star game rosters, what do you guys think? leave a comment down below. I've seen some people like the All-Star rosters. I've seen people not really like them at all. It'd be interesting to see what everyone thinks. So leave a comment down below, or wherever you are. If you're listening to this on SoundCloud, just leave a comment on what you think, who deserves to be there, who doesn't deserve to be there. If you 100% agree with this list, 100% disagree with this list for roster picks, let me know. It'd be interesting to see. So overall, I think the list is strong. And yeah, so yeah, that is the end of this podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed. I know this went a little longer than normal, and part of that is just because I talked about the All-Star game, and normally it does not go this long. So if you listen to this and you're like, this is really long, I can't listen to all of this, that's fine. I understand the length of these can go a little longer than normal. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Again, if you're listening to this on SoundCloud, leave a comment somewhere saying what you don't like about my outline. If you think I should change how I format something, let me know. And if you, again, leave a comment down below on if you think a certain team is better than what I listed, then, or worse than what I listed, and you think another team should be talked about, leave a comment down below. Also, favorite this if you're on SoundCloud, and follow me if you want to listen to more of my stuff. So, if you're listening to this on YouTube, again, leave a comment down below. Same kind of thing I just said to those who are listening to SoundCloud people, or who are on SoundCloud listening to this, I should say. And leave a comment down below. Your favorite team, if you think they deserve to be mentioned or that sort of thing, leave a comment down below. If you think I should reformat or do a different format for my outline, let me know down below. And as always, if you like the All-Star list, don't like the All-Star list, don't think a player deserves to be there, leave a comment down below. And subscribe if you're on YouTube for more content. I will be uploading more stuff. If you're on SoundCloud and you're listening to this, by the way, and you want to listen to a past podcast, all that stuff is on my YouTube channel, which is just Joshua Kessner. And if you're on YouTube and you just want to listen to this on the go while you're on SoundCloud, it is Joshua Kessner as well. This is my Hockey Sense podcast, so just look for that. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Again, leave a like down below if you liked it, dislike it if you disliked it. Subscribe for more content, or follow or favorite for more content. And I will see you guys in the next Hockey Sense podcast.